Stories matter. Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. How? Chimamanda Adichie is a Nigerian novelist who grew up reading British and American children's books. She remembers that when she began writing at age 7, she wrote the same kind of stories she had read. Adichie states, "Because all I had read were books in which the characters were foreign, I had become convinced that books by their very nature had to have foreigners in them and had to have things with which I could not personally identify." With this, Adichie highlights the omission of certain identities within the stories she had read, leaving children like her unidentified and unrepresented, and if they are represented, it is in only one way. Another issue that arises from this is the issue of stereotypes. The single story, as Adichie calls it, creates only a single identity for those the story illustrates. The single story can steal dignity by erasing the importance of human equality. So, that is how to create a single story. Show people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. Adichie claims that stories have been used to dispossess and malign. What does this mean in the context of single stories? Well, relating back to the issue of stereotypes, if stories are told often and singly, the stories will be seen as true. For example, in Adichie's case, the single story for Africans in America is a dehumanizing and offensive one. When Adichie came to America for college, her roommate thought she would not know how to use a stove. Her professor told her that her writing was not truly African enough, for it involved middle-class people with cars and lives. This is a single story that has been told time and time again about the way Africans must live, and it is untrue. Adichie did not even know this story herself. She was robbed of her sense of self when she came to America, told who she was based on prejudiced single stories, all to her surprise. Despite all this, Adichie says that stories can be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. After Chimamanda discovered African literature as a child, she describes how she went through a mental shift in her perception of literature. She realized that people like her, girls with skin the color of chocolate whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized. This is how stories empower and humanize. When stories that break away from stereotyping are created, children and even adults who had once had no voice are given one. Stories can be used to fill in the blanks for those whose histories and cultures have been left blank in society. I agree with Adichie's statements fully. Stories are capable of including or excluding identities, which makes them capable of empowering or oppressing people of certain identities. Everyone can create stories, and it is important that they be aware of this in order to avoid single stories.